So I thought I'd try something new. People have asked me about how my Nighthaunt have ended up looking so good in a very, very quick process. I thought I'd record some of these ones. So I've got some Nighthaunt here. They've been primed black. First step is Pro Acryl Dark Warm Grey, which I dry brush over the entire model. Quite a heavy dry brush in this case. I'll do a couple of these Nighthaunts until I run out of the paint. So using the Artisopus board, just a very, very heavy dry brush all over whole model. Not too worried about this. You know, I'm not too bothered if it gets all over grey, because it'll be dulled back down again when I use the enamel wash. Yeah, this is providing the main kind of the base colour, as it were. Everything else builds off of. It's a fairly quick process on each model. Again, quite a heavy dry brush. It's allowed me to knock out about 2,000 points of Nighthaunts, although that's not at all optimized in terms of the actual army itself. I need a whole load more chain rasps and possibly spirit hosts and other things like that before I actually have what I consider a usable army. But there's certainly, I've managed to knock out a whole lot of models, including an awful lot of characters, in about 4 weeks. Not to worry about the base at the moment. That's the first step. I'll lay those dry for a bit, and I'll do a couple more models as well while I'm at it. It's just a very all over heavy dry brush. Okay, in all the model. The only thing I found with the Nighthaunts is, because a lot of them are quite flimsy, is often having to stick my finger behind them to give them some support. Apologies if I keep bringing the models out of frame. This is my first time trying to record. I don't have any particularly impressive setup. It's a tablet holder with my phone in it, in a slightly awkward position. Just make sure I've got nice, good coat, dark grey all over the model. So, what's my next step? Well, so we've got some mostly grey models. The next step is then to do a lighter grey. I've got scale colour, a scale 75, graphite, SC03. Not quite as much of that. It doesn't matter if I've got a dark grey cylinder. In fact, it actually helps with colour transitions. So this is a lighter. It's a lighter grey, and this is a slightly more careful dry brush. Put a bit more on my brush. So mostly traditional dry brushing with a little bit of stippling, but it's sort of most of that sort of good old circular motion that the Artisopus and similar brushes are actually amazingly good for. So yeah, this all started out as a way for me to, basically, during one of the previous lockdowns, I picked up some Nighthaunts because I always thought they were really cool models. Didn't really do a lot with them. Did a couple of test schemes I was never really happy with. Decided to do a couple of models as a test for painting my Cursed City, as a way to kind of the monochrome, mostly monochrome scheme as a way to get the Cursed City knocked out really quickly for all the enemy guys. And then I found I really enjoyed it, and so I've painted loads more Nighthaunt since. I've got about, including, there's 8 more Mermorn Banshees to assemble currently, and this lot here on the table. What's that? 16 more models, and I'll have a lot of painted Nighthaunt. About the quickest I've ever painted an army. So it's still fairly heavy at this stage. I'm not too worried about it. Again, I will knock it all back with the enamel wash stage. Something I do find is pay careful attention, because they've got such characterful faces, especially the ones where it's a cloak or a hood providing the face. So I make sure that I get plenty of highlights on there, because it ends up being such a focus. I mean, the face on this guy is just, I love the executioner's sort of weird mask face. Bit more light grey. So currently, in terms of what I've got unpainted of the, painted, I've got, what have I got painted? 9 Chain Rasps, Thorns of the Briar Queen, 5 Stalkers, 10, maybe 11 Reapers, Cairn Wraith, 2 Dreadblade Harrows, 2 Executioners, Krulgast Cruciator, basically quite lots of both versions of the Knight of whatever it's called, the mounted and Knight of Sorrows, I think. One mounted, one on foot, or not mounted. Thorns of the Briar Queen, I think I've said that. So I've got left, and I've painted 4 of the Banshees as well. So again, make sure the upper areas, stiffle the upper area a little bit, make sure they get a bit brighter than the rest. All this sort of ectoplasm type effect as well, with haunting spirits. Right, next step is the white. Pro Acryl Bold Titanium White. I do quite like this as a white. So this one I want to be a much more controlled dry brush. Really picking out the high spots. Step up the top a little bit. Make sure to get some on the skull. Nice thing about this though is, because it's quite a rough paint scheme, is by its very nature it can be fairly flexible. A lot of the heavy lifting is done by the wash and various other effects. Wash and the rust do a lot of it, and the base really helps to from it. He's pretty much done on that stage. Again, same idea. Stiffling the top. sure to get plenty on the face. Obviously, the face and whatnot can get a bit of, on the next stage, which is where I paint in a couple of manual highlights. And you see, you can move through the stages very quickly. So I'm going straight in, picking out some detail on that lovely, very expressive face. Thanks to the cloak. A bit more white. The weapons on the executioners in particular, I'm going to make sure I get lots of white because they end up getting glowy magical blades. So obviously, rather than just being covered in rust and letting the rust effect do all the work, I'm actually trying to make it look vaguely reasonable beforehand. Needs a good solid base for the speed paints. Similarly, the various ectoplasmic ghost things on sort of spirits whirling around him should be quite bright as well, because they need to end up fairly bright. I think the first few stages are done. Next step. Paint some manual highlights. Well, actually, I might come back on him with another round of white. I think he needs to be brighter. Nice thing about this is it's fairly easy to kind of go for it. You can go up the stages fairly gently, and it gives you an ability to really control just how light or dark you're going to be. Something like that. I probably should use a wet palette rather than on the palette itself, but this isn't about highlighting every detail, it's just getting some of those main large areas. Fairly standard, basically edge highlighting all the extremes. And when I mess up, it's all fairly wet, fairly quick. You know. Areas in particular to make sure I get plenty of white. Things like the tops of the arms, because they're going to be basically made to look like bone, and so benefit from starting with quite a bright base to let the speed paints do their work. fairly rough and ready. Edge highlighting, a little bit more on the face. Hope this is all in focus. I thought about using a slightly more grey-white for these sorts of finer highlights, but I like the extreme. As I said, I'm going to knock it all back with enamel washes, and enamel wash anyway, and having these extremes give me quite a nice basis. Keeps me honest. It's only a rough and ready. It doesn't need to be perfect, doesn't need to do all the highlights, just enough to give a general sense of where the super areas are. I think he's about done for now. Maybe a couple more places. So the always fun part of acrylics when they dry are a lot less bright than when they are wet as well. With that, right, see you in the next one.